Okay, then let's start now. Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar IR24, Rising Your Company's International Profile, the Do's and Don'ts, presented to us today by Anne Guimard.
Hello, Patrick. Hello, everyone.
I would like to briefly introduce Anne. Anne Guimard, founder and CEO of Fineo Investor Relations Advisors, is widely recognized as an IR legend by Investor Relations magazine and by myself too, of course. With over 30 years of global experience in capital markets and shareholder engagement, Anne has excelled in roles ranging from sell-side analyst and investment banker to Chief Investor Relations Officer and Financial Controller at multi-listed European conglomerates. Since founding Fineo in 1998, she has become a world leader in investor relations training and coaching, advising over 1,500 companies in more than 70 countries, including guiding Saudi Aramco ahead of its record-breaking IPO. Anne is the author of Investor Relations Principles and International Best Practices in Financial Communications and numerous other publications. She served as a board director for the NERI National Investor Relations Institute, and currently she is a IR training partner for the Middle East Investor Relations Association, further cementing her status as a global authority in the field. Please join me in welcoming Anne as she shares her invaluable insights and expertise with us today. Anne will be happy to answer your questions. Simply use Zoom's Q&A function, type in your question, and I will pass it on to Anne. Dear Anne, the screen is yours.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much, dear Patrick. I do apologize for our German audience today. My German is far too rusty to conduct this webinar, but I really want, first of all, to thank you for attending and for Patrick's kind words on myself. Indeed, I have been I'm passionate about investor relations, and I have been doing investor relations one way or the other, depending on the side of the desk where I am sitting, for over 30 years. So my challenge today is to bring to you 30 years of experience in about 30 minutes so that we have enough time for question and answers. As Patrick rightly said, please don't be ashamed to ask just about anything, and I will do my best. No questions are ever stupid or inappropriate. This session is for you. It's free. Make the most of it so that you have a good ROI on your time. A quick word about Fineo Investor Relations Advisors. I established Fineo about 25 years ago this year. Actually, this is our 25th anniversary, and we're finance people. We are what is called in English a boutique, but we are a rather unique boutique because we're only former investor relations officers, and we've put investor relations training at the heart of our practice. So all in all, probably 1,500 plus companies in over 70 countries. Consulting, advisory services, and training, which is the purpose of today's session. I won't introduce myself anymore, or again, rather, Patrick has very kindly done so already. Let me walk you briefly through the agenda of our session. It's going to be very hands-on, very practical. It's basically how you do it, but I will start this webinar by, asking you, going internationally, do you have a very valid reason, or you starting from scratch, you've never done it before, or actually you've done some attempts at diversifying your shareholder base internationally, but you're not too happy about the success that you've had so far? So chapter one, or the beginning of the webinar, will be about actually asking yourself the right questions. Is it for me? Is it for my company? Is it the right moment also to try and either strengthen or build from scratch an international presence among non-domestic portfolio managers? Then, assuming that you've asked yourself these questions, there's another one, another question that you've got to ask yourselves, which is, do we have what it takes to succeed? Do we have the right organization in place? Do we have the right resources? And investor relations has got nothing to do with the size of a company. I mean, best practice investor relations is disconnected or should be disconnected to the size of your IR budget. Nonetheless, if you are return on investment driven, and I hope you are all, you still need to know whether you can embark on a international diversification journey, whether you have the resources and the commitment from the top of your organization to do so, and with focusing on the long term. And quite importantly, and I'll come back to that through the webinar, quite importantly, whether you're strong enough to maintain that international presence through the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm meaning through all the cycles that your respective companies may go through. Then a third aspect, we will discuss actually who is it that you would like the valuation of? Which company do you admire? Are these companies competitors? What are they better valued than you are? Is it strictly a matter of financial metrics, or has their IR program, down to their websites, for instance, to their IR section on their website, has got something to do in their success? Then chapter 4 will dive right into the heart of the matter, meaning how do you actually do it? Okay, assuming you're set on to going global or accelerating what you've been doing so far. Are you sure you're ticking all the right boxes? I'll pinpoint some easy fixes, some longer term ones, but there are a few things that can make a whole lot of difference in the way investors outside of your home country, outside of your own market, perceive you. And then how do you measure success beyond the share price, beyond the number of non-domestic international investors you may have converted as shareholders? And we will conclude by offering some ideas as to, okay, you failed, you have a plan B, and you do have a plan B. So with this, let's dive right into the first slide. Beyond borders, why should your company be on or why should your company want to be on the radar of global investors? Now, this is a slide that I systematically use in every single IR training or investor relations coaching session that I do. And this slide has not really changed over the years, meaning it is still relevant in 2024 and 2025, because I'm assuming that all of you are already setting their eyes on next year and maybe preparing and finalizing your IR strategy for next year. What is in red in this slide is actually 4 reasons why you might want to raise your visibility, or to raise your presence internationally, or to raise your awareness with investors outside of your home markets. One is corporate reputation. So the way this slide works is you have stakeholders on both sides, on both ends, and you have an arrow at the bottom which says legal and strategic milestones. Let's focus on the strategic milestone. It means that, and we all know that it is the case in IR, and that works in the decision-making process that we're discussing today. We know that our companies, or the companies that we advise, or the companies that we work for, they have a strategic journey. They have a strategic roadmap. Some of it they have 100% control over, and some of it they don't, for all sorts of external reasons. So the line at the bottom goes to the future. It's the life cycle of a company, meaning there are several cycles. And at some point in time, we know, you experience that on a daily basis, that your IR program will serve to sustain or improve your company's reputation. And not just by putting out or reporting a good set of numbers, but also, on the environment and social and governance front. Are you ticking the right boxes in the eyes of investors and in the eyes of all your stakeholders, internal and external stakeholders? through the life cycle of your company, your IR program may be more focused on raising valuation. You know, there are sometimes I also say that, and it's a fact actually, there are about 53,000 listed companies in the world. And I have yet to meet a CEO of a listed company or an IRO, but definitely is a senior executive of a listed company that will tell me our stock price is too high. Every single company that I can think of, and I have a number of examples, as you can imagine, they all say, they all think, and you might be no exception to that, and for a very valid reason, that your company is undervalued. So let's do more IR to raise our valuation. And let's try and attract foreign shareholders to increase our valuation, because it seems that our direct competitors in other markets have a higher valuation. Liquidity. IR serves as a major liquidity driver. But it is also contingent upon your capital, your share ownership structure. I was having the discussion last week, actually, with a client in an emerging market that is partly state-owned. Investors overseas don't really like companies that are state-owned, even partly. So is it worth for them to really engage on a time-consuming, costly, program of international roadshows? It remains valid, but don't they have more of a challenge than all of you participating in today's webinars who might have 100% free float or 70% free float? Liquidity is also driven by the number of sell-side analysts covering your stock. Do you have enough international or foreign sell-side analysts covering your company? Have you considered, if you have none of these, and because your efforts to achieve that goal, to have more analysts covering your stock, have failed, have you considered independent hiring or investing in independent research? And last but not least, capital raising. Are you sure that your shareholder base, your current shareholder base, whom you may be very happy with, are you sure that they are going to be able to provide you with the capital, with the financing that you need for your growth and development strategy? How about looking for money elsewhere, outside of your home market? And this is also a purpose or one of the rationale that could justify a strategy of increasing your visibility overseas. So this is the background slide. At some point in time, we all of our companies, all of your companies go through different cycles. Is it the right moment in your cycle to go overseas or to go abroad or to raise your visibility internationally? A couple of do's and don'ts with this in mind. If you are at the stage where you're actually asking yourselves these questions, should we increase what are the benefits, should we increase our visibility internationally? Then I do recommend that you conduct a SWOT analysis. SWOT is strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And we can help you do that if this is something that you'd like to explore. Cost benefit is another analysis, because cost is not just hard money, hard euros or dollars. How much it costs to go, to travel and meet investors overseas? How much does it cost to actually distribute your earnings releases overseas? How much does it cost in terms of management time, basically? Is your CEO's time better employed running the business or spending his time courting investors in New York or in London? And I'm, of course, exaggerating, but this is just to give you an idea of those items in the cost and benefit analysis. On the benefits side, I find to this date, and that keeps surprising me, that the power of investor relations when it comes to intelligence gathering is under-optimized. Think about this. You're attending an investor conference in New York or in London or even in Dubai, wherever, right? You're meeting the arranging broker or investment bank is suggesting that you meet with XYZ investors. This is not a super just Q&A session. this is, and please do take this opportunity if you haven't done so yet, ask your own questions, because let's assume I am a London-based investor. I'm attending this conference, I'm meeting with you, or I'm visiting your city, I'm having a meeting with you, company ABC or XYZ, whatever, but I'm meeting with other companies. How about you ask me how my meetings have gone so far? You know, what is the feeling I get? What is the impression I get from talking to my competitors? This is market intelligence and market gathering at best. And actually, investors enjoy this, having this type of discussion. Think beyond shareholder diversification, because your companies, it's quite likely, are either already operating overseas or outside of your home market. Meeting investors in those home markets might prove extremely valuable. Not necessarily to bring them on board as shareholders, but again, to have that intelligence about you're considering doing M&A in a given country, and you're meeting investors from that country. They're going to provide you with invaluable insights, very practical, that you can act on or decide precisely not to go ahead with any given transaction. I'll give you a real life example. A few years ago, we were advisors to an IT service company, a European IT service company, and they wanted to. It was a small cap, by the way. Market cap was about a bit less than 500 million euros at the time. And the CEO kept going every quarter, and they were not reporting on a quarterly basis, but he kept going several times a year to the US. And we were tasked, among other things, with doing their short ownership analysis. And we could not, quarter after quarter, we could not find any US shareholder in their share registers. So one day, I took it upon myself to tell the CEO, sir, are you sure your time is well employed going to the US all the time, or frequently rather than all the time? Because, I mean, this is frustrating, and you're going to be disappointed because you don't have US shareholders. I mean, your free float is too small, your market cap is too small. Are you sure you want to continue to do that? And his answer is something that I've never forgotten, was, yes, I will continue and do that, because I know my company is too small to attract genuinely attract US shareholders. But I'm after doing an M&A, a big transaction. I've set my eyes on that company, and I want to acquire it. And once it's acquired and integrated, then I want to spin it off locally. So I need to be fully prepared, and I need to understand myself. By the way, he owned the company. I want to understand by myself, what is it that makes US investors tick? What is it that they like, what they don't like about that industry, the type of metrics that they expect us to report on? That's a strategic decision. And by the way, this is another reason why going internationally is another way to get your seat at the table. This is the holy grail of most investor relations officers, or very often, or at least in smaller or mid-cap companies. You participate. Yeah.
Just a short question. Do you have a threshold of free float market cap which is necessary to get US investors into your shareholder base?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And thank you, Patrick, for mentioning that question. I'd say below 500, there are two things there, actually. You have the market cap size and you have a free float. I would say that below 50% as a rule is becoming super challenging, okay? And in terms of market cap size, unless you have a very specific story, and unless you're fast growing and you have no profitability issues and you're paying a dividend, or you have the right business model, if you are below €1 billion, you're going to face very, very tough competition. But as we will see through the rest of the webinar, there are ways to kind of circumvent this. But I'd say, simplifying things, I'd say below 500 million and maybe even 700 million euros of market cap, this is challenging. And and a market cap of less than, let's say, 700 million, 1 billion is challenging as well. Because competition, you're going to be in competition against so many other companies, including US companies, for instance. But I will give you a few tips on how you can circumvent this to some extent. But if for some reason you are below those thresholds, then this is the plan B that we're going to discuss at the end of the presentation. I mean, nothing is, it's not a no forever. Maybe it's not the right moment now. I hope I've answered your question. So I've done the do's, and let me have a look at the don'ts. Don't go alone. Ask for brokers' help. Ask for sell side advice. And this is, investor relations is not the super Q&A session. I mean, the investors or the analysts get to ask the Qs, and you get to answer. Ask your own questions. Provide that feedback. I mean, if you want, you can also do but I would not necessarily recommend that in those instances. It's a perception survey. It's ask investors' opinion. Should we look for non-German shareholders? Are there any merits or benefits from you, Mr. or Mrs. the investor's perspective? Don't take it for granted that everyone can do it, and rightly so. And the question that Patrick just asked is precisely on this. For some companies, this is not the way to go, going internationally, or it is not the way to go now. But nothing prevents you from getting prepared, because there are a few basics that can have a very high return. And don't underestimate the journey. What I mean by that, it might sound a very simplistic sentence there, but it's to say, it's not because you're going to attend 2 conferences, one in London, one in New York, that all of a sudden you're going to become international, okay? This is a long-term process, okay? And I would say that it's very unlikely that you would see tangible benefits or tangible, new foreign shareholders in your share register, if this is what you're after, before at least 18 months. So meaning several cycles of reporting.
Anne, I have an additional question from the audience. Why should the free float be diversified by a company?
That's a very good question. Yeah. Well, free float diversification means how concentrated is your shareholder base? To what extent are you at risk as a company? To what extent is your valuation at risk if, in the case of a concentrated shareholder base, 1 or 2 shareholders decide to sell, and you have not prepared, you have not maintained a pool of potential investors? Remember that an investor's job is not only to buy, it is also to sell. And selling doesn't mean it's negatively against your company. The free float, the composition is important in terms of the concentration of the free float. I mean, if you have a free float of 70%, but you only have 3 large shareholders, I mean, you have a concentrated free float, meaning that for me, the potential investor, I'm going to have a hard time buying your shares, or it's going to take me forever. And by the time I get there, maybe one day I will want to unload some of my holdings. This is going to take me forever as well, and maybe not in good financial terms. The very important question to ask yourself there is, are you happy as a company with the composition, the size and the composition of your free float? Is it made of shareholders who are, I say, loyal, who are there for the long term, who are diversified in their own investment styles and horizons enough so that it creates liquidity? So first off, are you happy with your free float, the way it is made of? Do you have the right balance between shareholders that are retail shareholders and institutional investors? Do you feel that you have that your current free float is going to support you as you develop and execute your strategy? Is it also going to stay? You know, I used this expression earlier, through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Diversification is a way to diversify risks. I think for me, you need to diversify free float. How diversified, it's up to you for each company to do this assessment in particular. So moving on to the next, and if I haven't answered the question, I trust Patrick will raise his hand and tell me, please, you need to tell more, and I will. Is your company ready for world stage? So you have a whole list there of items that are going to dictate, to inform your decision about whether or not to go bigger on the international horizon. Long-term strategy. Do you need international investors to support your long-term strategy? Maybe your home market, that's not necessarily the case in Germany, but maybe we have participants who are not non-German with us today. Maybe your home market is not big enough to accommodate your own financial needs, your own financing needs, right? For your long-term strategy. Do you have an investor presentation that articulates a long-term vision, and hopefully with a robust description of your business model, your financing requirements, and in an ideal world, some quantified objectives that you'd like to achieve in the long term? Keep in mind that every listed company, you remember I told you, give you that example earlier, 50,000 listed companies in the world, they all think that their share price is too low. Well, those same 50,000 listed companies, they only all want long-term shareholders. So meaning that your company is in competition against 49,999 other companies. So how do you differentiate yourselves as well? Having a long-term strategy, having a written and available one that I can download from your website, is a differentiating factor. And it's a matter to, it's a way also of building trust. Do you have the right size? I think I've touched on that, but as I've said, there are some ways of circumventing size if size really is the issue. What is your business track record? Okay. And by the way, one of the often underutilized opportunities to go abroad is the appointment of a new CEO or the appointment of a new CFO. What is your track record? What is their track record as leaders? Because I'm going to meet with the CEO who has that track record of turning the company around. That's another way of building trust. Do you have, that may seem very silly, but believe me, that is not necessarily always the case. Is there an investor relations team in your company? Is there an investor relations officer? Even if it's only a one-man or one-woman team, and there are many of those. If you're the CFO of a company, do not consider that you can try and expand your international shareholder base without an investor relations officer, because this person is going to front, to take all, do the follow-up, do the targeting before even doing the follow-up, do the targeting, come up with a strategy, articulate the company's strategy for those potential investors. It's like going to market without an after-sales service team, basically, if I can use this analogy. Do you have an IR website? Or at least, let me phrase that differently. Is there an IR section on your website? Are you using, and I'll give you an anecdote, are you using the same type of tabs that most companies use? For instance, there are some countries, and I'm thinking in particular of South Africa. South Africa is Africa's largest stock market, extremely regulated and extremely respected. They don't have earnings releases. That does not exist. What they have, which is very similar, is called SENS. It's an acronym, SENS. So when the South African companies have in their IR section a tab that says SENS, Me, in my London office, I'm desperately looking for the results for their earnings, and I can't find those because there's no tab that says results or earnings. There's a tab that says cents, and what is that? Okay. Don't try to be original. Best practice also suggests that you need to align as much as possible your IR efforts and collaterals to what is going to make investors' lives easier to find you and stay with you. Organization. So of course that ties into the IR team, but organization and share ownership structure for me work hand in hand. I gave you the example a few minutes ago of this company, which was half state-owned, right? Or is there the possibility in the future that the state may actually want to reduce its stake, meaning it will boost, it will enhance, it will increase your free float, so you'll be in a better position to attract more non-domestic shareholders or institutions if this is what you're looking for. The mindset. Going internationally in IR, as in any other operational function, means being ready, willing, and able to adjust to cultural differences. Okay, this is something worth considering as well. Maybe you're not ready as a company, and I'm not being critical there, I'm just stating a fact. Maybe as a company, you're not ready yet to face criticisms from foreigners who know nothing about your country, right? Or don't understand your country. This means that, and I'll give you another example, this means that sometimes you need to step back behind your company because foreign investors may first and foremost want to ask you questions, to hear you say what you have to say about the state of your country's economy, about the way interest rates or currencies are fluctuating, about regulations that are being implemented or that will disappear. I have the example of a client who used to go to North America 1 year and the alternative year to London. And it was a troubled country. They're an interesting company, but from a troubled country. And the CEO, who was not taking, by the way, that was a big mistake, the CEO who was not taking the investor relations officer on board came back from those roadshows and said, I'm sick and tired of doing that. It's totally uninteresting because all they ask is about my country's economy. Right, that's not necessarily a CEO role. If he had the investor relations officer on board, this person would have paved the way for this type of questions. So this is also part of what it takes to be successful at attracting non-local shareholders. Financial and reporting systems. I'm not at all suggesting that those of you who do not report on a quarterly basis should all of a sudden report on a quarterly basis to attract US investors. That could help, okay? But that is not necessarily a must-have. When I was an investor relations officer at Alcatel, we were listed across Europe and in Japan and in the US. And I remember doing roadshows when I first got the job in that company. I was doing roadshows in the US, and we were reporting on a quarterly basis. So I assumed, our quarterly reporting is exactly what US investors are expecting. The thing was, this was not. So we had to come back to head office and to the CFO and say, look, this is the type of, I'd say, disclosures or reporting that US investors looking at our industry are expecting from us. So until we have this, there's no point in doing roadshows in the US, which we ultimately fixed and resumed. Corporate governance. This is a big thing, okay? Is your corporate governance aligned with best practices? How many independent, truly independent directors do serve on your board? I'm not going to touch on any ESG, any other ENS related topic today, but corporate governance is definitely something that needs to be in order to attract foreign investors. And typically there are two things. The number of independent, two things that come to mind, the number of independent directors That's one thing. The second thing is whether you have a lead director as well. That very much helps, because the lead director is increasingly asked to meet with investors. And the share ownership structure, and I think I have touched on that. So this is a list of
we have a question from the audience, and I just read it. What is more important or harmful for an international investor? Bad economic indicators or corruption? And the author of the question is not sure if this is a rhetoric question, he writes.
I love this question. I don't have the answer. I love it because I don't have the answer. I'd be tempted to think, and I'm thinking out loud there, I'd be tempted to think that I can't imagine a country with outstanding macroeconomics and outstanding corruptions, or a lot of corruptions. For me, this tends to, but I'm maybe not especially there, tends to go hand in hand. I would say, from the investor's perspective, you have a fiduciary duty to invest, unless it is your own money that you're investing, but you're investing and managing the money of others. Okay, so you must have a number of criteria that have been forced on you, or that you have agreed to. If you don't have trust in the country's economy, if you don't have trust in a particular company, then don't invest. This is again maybe a bit simplistic. If you are on the company side, let's put aside the corruption. Let's put aside the corruption piece for 1 minute. Operating in an economy which is not doing well does not mean that you should necessarily abstain from considering, and I'm being very cautious there, from considering venturing outside of your country's borders, because it might serve your business. I mean, you may want to do M&A, or acquire business, or invest in another country, rebalancing your revenue streams, right? At least from a geographical perspective. The other element, which is also part of the plan B, which we'll be discussing in the end, are you sure that you have exhausted all the possibilities offered to you by your local investor base, beyond the what I call sometimes the usual suspects, beyond the tier one? Very good question. I'm not sure I have done a good job at answering it, but definitely a challenge. Do's and don'ts. Work with corporate communications. I mean, investor relations all over the world tend to work in silos. There's corp comms on the one hand, there is IR on the other hand, and then you tend to work every now and then together, maybe for big announcements, or the annual report, or maybe the corporate website. The point that I'd like to make here is that the more, I would say, media support, media visibility you can get overseas, the better it will help your IR outreach programs or efforts. It's about having it's something that I'm jumping to right now, but I'll come back to that maybe later. It's what I call failing the Google test. Do this outside of your home country. Next time you go on holidays, okay, or next time you're traveling for business, type your company's name in Google under the news section and see what comes up. The latest announcement, or something that dates back to last year. And that last example is a lot more frequent than you would think, and a lot more frequent than you should think, that you should hope for. So media coverage, media, I'd say visibility. That can be social media visibility as well, but it's IR alone won't. That's the point that I'm making. Maybe your products are distributed in those countries as well. Audit your IR resources. Budget, not only budget, it's actually time. Do you have time to develop an international IR outreach program? When I say you, it's you as an IRO, it's your management team. And quite importantly, can you do this consistently even the day your results for any reason just tank, right? Meaning when you have a crisis, do you have the right mindset to be strong enough to say, we're going to confront the market with bad news because we have a story to tell and we have a story we believe in. Test and validate the idea with investors and analysts. Ask them, I'm consistently coming back to that because I find it's so utilized and it's free, by the way. Ask them, do you think we should go to conferences? Do you think we should bring more investors? And by the way, who do you think we should reach out to do that? Get the endorsement of the board and the leadership team. This is critical because and I do recommend that, by the way, while the investor relations officer will do a lot of the groundwork, okay, don't send your CEO or CFO on the road show to London or New York for those big markets, or even Switzerland, or Dubai or wherever. If to meet with investors, the investor relations officer, have not met with before, right? Prepare the ground, and that will make everyone's life easier, and that will actually resonate well with the CEO and CFO when it comes to assessing or evaluating the quality of the job that investor relations officers deliver. Don't embark without a plan. Yes, Patrick.
Yeah, how can I prepare the ground as you describe it? Sending the presentation in advance, or do a pre-roadshow with IR only, or what do you think of a good way of preparing the ground?
Those are two excellent ways. It's interacting, it's knocking on the door, so to speak, which can be done virtually. But definitely, I do recommend that it can be an investor relations officer only roadshow, or even if it's not necessarily a roadshow per se, some kind of interactivity. Yes, you prepare the ground. I'll give you another real life example as well, which is a counter example, so to speak. But so I was investor relations officer in a company that manufactured flat glass, Saint-Gobain. In other words, that was the first one of the very first IR departments ever to be established in Europe, and we had a large London-based institutional shareholder. And my boss, the CFO, literally hated doing roadshows. So I was only entitled 2 one-on-ones a year. The rest of it, maybe a couple of lunches, investor lunches, and that was it. So we walk into the room, and here comes this young portfolio manager asking my boss, how does one manufacture flat glass? Which was very, very embarrassing. I mean, the guy perfectly well knew how to manufacture flat glass, but my CFO boss turns to me and says, all right, I'm going to answer this question, and then I'm going to leave. So, which he did, by the way. The groundwork is you can send out your presentation, but you want to follow up. You're not going to send out a presentation without commenting on it, okay? It's reaching out. It's reaching out. There's so much, there's so much in IR that is comparable to marketing, okay? It's investors who, you've been invited by a broker to attend a conference. It's meeting with investors there, maybe sending them out the presentation in advance, but asking for feedback, following up, sending season's greetings. This is a very easy one, super easy, very rare, because differentiating as well. We are going to go into the earnings, the season's greetings season shortly. How about sending your best wishes for the new year with your financial calendar? You might expect, if you have a financial calendar on your website, you might expect me, the investor, to find out about it. But the whole difference is I'm going to get it from you with a nice quick email saying, hey, looking forward to hearing from you when we report results on X February 2025. life is made of very small, and success and in life, in that particular instance, is made of very small things that hardly anybody thinks of, and that will differentiate yourselves. That will help you get onto those radar screens. Give up. Something that you should not also do is giving up on local shareholders. Okay. There are some underserviced institutional investors or family offices, okay, or smaller pension funds, or investment clubs that no one ever meets, no one ever talks to, okay? You do that if you're too small or not ready yet to go overseas and promote your companies on international capital markets. Don't rule out, or don't ignore it. Let me phrase it differently. Don't ignore the benefits of being super strong and super visible on your home market as well. You will also have to probably revisit your financial reporting and your disclosure. And that leads me to the next point, which is, what is your, I'd say, how does your financial reporting compare with that of your peers, or that of your international peers and or competitors? Because you may have peers who are not necessarily head-to-head competitors with your business on a daily basis. This is very important. Maybe they report a number of operational or financial metrics voluntarily that you don't, because you don't want to show them, or because no one has told you that you could, or no one has even recommended that you should report on those metrics. Do your homework. If your metrics that today you're not reporting for any reason are actually better than those that your peers or those than your competitors, then show it. Be more transparent. It doesn't mean say everything. Of course not. I'm not recommending that. But revisit the point that I'm making, the recommendation, and that's a very strong one, because I know this is one that pays off really nicely. Disclose better. Disclose better. Look at a set of operational metrics which show that you deliver on your strategic directions, which show that you're a better manager, you're a better steward of your company's assets than your competitors are on theirs. So who's your true valuation yardstick? So the usual suspects there are the companies that you fight, that you compete against on a daily basis. Same industry, same country, same products, same end market, same customers, more or less, right? But you need to go a little bit beyond that. Don't restrict yourself to only this pool of comparable or competitors or peers. Maybe there are companies out there in your ecosystem, or in the ecosystem that you're targeting overseas, that are not exactly comparable to you, but you may have something in common, which may be a product, which may be a technology, which may be a patent, which may be a distributor, which may be a large shareholder as well. Are they reporting better than you are? Are they valued better? So that's broadening your horizons when it comes to assessing who your peer group really is. And then sometimes you might say it's for fun, but because this is going to entail a lot of work, who are the companies, or who is the company that you would like to emulate? This has nothing to do with your industry, but some companies that has the reputation you love your company to have. You're never going to achieve their size or their geographical footprint, but you love them and they are loved by investors. This is what I call the investor darlings, okay? Look at their investor relations program. Are there things that they're doing you're not, and you could actually do? Always consistently reinvent what you're doing and always thrive for the best. And look for where, this is what I mean by broadening your horizons. Look beyond your own competitive landscape, because this is what investors are doing. You know, at the end of the day, regardless of whether we're talking about internationalizing your shareholder base or any other investor relations topic, the whole thing is about thinking like an investor or an analyst, and that will take you a long way. Award winners. With Extel, we've developed what we call the Investor Relations Acceleration Performance Acceleration Program, where we look at the companies that have won Extel IR awards, okay, or maybe awards in that are given by your local investor relations society. Why did XYZ company win an award and you didn't? Okay, maybe there are some improvements, which I call the easy fixes that you can implement without necessarily much cost, so that you know, reputation is a huge way of gaining visibility as well, and awards or prizes are definitely an accelerator of this performance. Share price performance and index inclusion. Those are at the bottom of my list, not because they are less important, but because you don't have full control over those. Your share price performance, you know, it's something that you cannot control, no matter how much you'd like to. And the index inclusion is the same thing. However, if we look at the DAX 40 and companies that are not in the DAX 40 index, we all know in the IR industry, anywhere in the world, that when you get promoted, when your company gets promoted and join an index, it has a positive impact on your share price and on your valuation. Hence, it attracts benchmark funds, or I'd say more passive investors maybe than you would like, but still it contributes to broadening also your international or to raise the international awareness that investors may have of your company. What can you do there for the do's and the don'ts? Define your valuation metrics and your peer group. And by the way, defining your peer group will also help analysts tracking the right companies, because I'm sure it has happened to some of you where a sell-side analyst or maybe an investor will want to compare you to a company that is actually irrelevant, either because you don't have the same business model or you've been in business for longer or shorter time. Define your valuation metrics. And when I say valuation metrics, I'm not necessarily in this instance thinking of, you know, your P ratio or this type of pure valuation metric. I am thinking of the type of metrics which you want to be, which you want investors to look at when it comes to your company, but also the type of valuation metrics on which you want your boss to value your effort to promote the company internationally. Is it, and we'll see this at the end, is it, you know, the number of, or the percentage rather of your free float that is held by non-local investors versus what it was a year ago? You know, this is the type of valuation metric that I'm particularly alluding to here. List the top 3 companies you'd like to emulate and outshine, you know, and this is something that I've addressed, but have a clear plan, have a roadmap, and benchmark your IR program against international best practices and this particular select group of peers. I am 100% sure you will identify what I call those quick fixes, like maybe having the right labels on the tabs on your IR website, having a financial calendar if you haven't had one so far. Remember, a financial calendar is not necessarily something that is set in stone, okay? You can always have a sentence below that says, you know, those are tentative dates, please come back to the website or we'll keep you informed, or anything, right? But don't, I mean, have one. Make my life, me as a potential investor, make my life easier. Remember, potentially, and I do admit this is rather theoretical, but it sets the whole framework. You are competing against 49,999 companies. You're competing for my money with those guys. Don't limit
as much as I like to listen to your presentation, I just want to remind you that we have only 5
minutes left. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. But I told you this was going to be a huge challenge, compressing 30 years of IR into just 1 hour. But I'm going to stop very quickly. I just want to jump onto this. So what works? You all do that. I'm not going to spend time on this because basically it's something that every company does more or less, okay, at some level. Let's look, however, at what innovates. And I do encourage you to look at there was an article, I think it was a few months ago on IR magazine, and I did check, it's available on their website. They have given an award to a Finnish company called Valmet that for their innovation in IR. So I've listed a few things there, social media, videos, including CEO videos, and I'll come back to that, podcast and finfluencers. Finfluencers, this is really if you'd like to attract more retail shareholders and more US retail shareholders that matter. What is interesting is, Instagram or LinkedIn, where I see not so much in Europe, true enough, but I see a growing number of CEOs taking to LinkedIn to present their results. You have in Germany, I was mentioning that to Patrick earlier, you have a LinkedIn page. It's very well done by a German company, which is called Brenntag. I don't know if it's participating with us today, but have a look at their LinkedIn page, their IR page on LinkedIn. It's well done. This is things that you can try. Of course, being quite careful about the disclosure risk, but that will help you. That will help to differentiate your companies. What works? What transforms? So you have another list. Okay, it's consistency, and that works, by the way, across market caps. Consistency through the cycles, meaning including, being brave enough to discuss poor earnings with international investors. Have a larger free float. This is bound to create more liquidity, which is bound, it's a circle, which is bound to increase and to attract more foreign investors as well. Have an investor presentation that I can download on your website and then decide whether or not I want to get a meeting with you, or to either at your headquarters or when you're next in London or in New York. Rewriting rather than translating. This is something important. Do invest time in rewriting. I'm not saying changing the meaning, okay? But be very careful, super careful about the quality of your translation from whatever language it is into English. Those are small differentiators, but quite remarkable as well. Distribute internationally your releases. I mean, this is remember that expression, the Google test. And when you're next on holidays, I do encourage that you do it. You'll probably be surprised. One thing which I have not discussed is the cross-border listing. Now, this can support, and I have managed up to 12 of those cross-border listings. This can support your business, not just your IR efforts or your visibility among non-local shareholders, but it can also support your, say more about your commitment to a market, a commitment to attracting investors. And typically you have large exchanges in the world, but you also have, for those of you who've never heard about it, I do encourage you to look at the OTC markets, which mean that providing your country, your company is eligible, you can actually list your shares on a US market without having to go through the whole LCC filing process. So you see, you have lots of things that do work that you can try and implement. Metrics, that I will go super quickly on because it's part of all our, I remember in this slide, I did say your valuation metrics, right? So there, the following slides, you have a list of metrics that you need to pick and choose from when you will want to assess how effective your efforts to raise your awareness among international shareholders, investors will help it. So you have the data analytics, which are more stock market related. Of course, you have your shareholder base, typically the geographical breakdown. And by the way, those metrics you can apply. This is for me the same metrics that I use in webinars, and I think Patrick, you had one, or you're going to have one soon about how you measure IR. So you can use those metrics to measure your IR program more generally. The increase in sell-side analyst coverage, especially outside of your home markets. Whether you will have been able to get into an index in your home country, which will have raised or triggered interest from investors overseas or abroad who will not have looked at your company because you were not in the local index. The cost of capital, typically also your ability to, let's say you do a rights issue and you need to be doing a big one, but your home market will not be sufficient. So to what extent a broader transaction will have attracted more non-domestic shareholders. Those are more IR program related. How many conferences have you been invited to? The portion or the breakdown between local and international investors. Again, those metrics you can use to support or assess or your the success of your internationalization of your IR program, but also for your program at large. What I have mentioned. Plan B, and I'll stop there. Don't forget about your home market. The strength of your presence on your home market is likely to attract foreign shareholders as well. If Plan A has worked, I do recommend that you don't scale back too much, meaning you don't stop what you've tried, because some of it will stay and some of it will allow you to seize those opportunities that may come in the future. And that is particularly true when it comes to the IR tool, the IR presence. Focus on the long term, and after all, it's all about relationship building. So with this, I want to thank you for your attention, for your questions, Patrick. You've been a wonderful Monsieur Loyal, as we say in French. And if there are any follow-on questions, I'm happy to stay on. Otherwise, I do encourage you to forward or email your questions to Patrick, and I'm sure he'll forward them to me, and I'll make sure I get back to you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, dear Anne. It was a pleasure to listen to your anecdotes, to your expertise, to your presentation. And we will all probably Google at the end of the year when we are all on holiday the names of our companies, and we are all curious what we will find out if we are in a foreign country, not in our home country, and we are curious to see what the other perspective might be. So thank you very much. Greetings to Paris, and maybe we will continue with the Plan B on another opportunity in time. But for today, it's the end of the webinar. We will continue the IR24 next week on Thursday with 6 new formats, which will be presented by fellow colleagues of investor relations, and the other topic will be creditor relations. So thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, Anne. Take care and have a good afternoon. Greetings from Paris and from Hamburg. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.